All right, this is going to be the best sales training that you have ever had. My name is Jason Fernandez, co-founder of Best Hour of Their Day podcast, where we produce more than 700 podcasts solely talking about gym ownership in the CrossFit space and coaching in the CrossFit space, and having helped 1,000 affiliate owners and more all across the world build better boxes. Now, I'm hedging my bets here about this being the best sales training you've ever had, probably because you've never had sales training before. Therefore, this will end up being the best sales training that you've ever had. So in our desire to create better and more engaging content, this series that we're making here is all about going deep. We're not going to go wide, we're going to go deep. That's what she said, Nate, right? So again, the whole purpose is to give you guys as much information and as many frameworks so that you can build a better box and then create as much impact in your local community as humanly possible. So we're going to be talking all things sales. So I do want to preface this with the fact that when we're talking about sales generally here, we are going to be very light in tactics, and we are going to be very, very heavy in strategy, principles, and models, because tactics change every day. Tactics vary across markets, across gyms and everything, and inevitably tactics become irrelevant very, very quickly. So my whole goal with regard to this specific video about sales is to give you frameworks that no matter what's going on, no matter what market you're in, no matter what your gym looks like, is you're going to be able to use these to apply the appropriate tactics so that you can grow and create the best box possible to create as much impact for you, your team, and your staff. All right, so to kick this off, I want to start with two models that I think are very, very important, but I first want to acknowledge that you very likely did not open your CrossFit gym because you were super in love with selling stuff. But the beauty of what we do is that we're not selling snake oil, we're not selling garbage, we're actually providing an opportunity for people to have longer, healthier lives. So if you struggle with sales, or you have this thought in your mind to say, hey, I really hate sales, recognize that you probably don't hate sales. You probably just are not good at sales. You've probably never been taught sales, and you probably just don't have the appropriate frameworks to start to get better at sales. Because what I would tell you is, if you start to practice sales, you will get better at sales, and then you will start to like sales. No similar than learning to snatch for the first time. I've never met a soul in my entire life that on their first day of snatching was like, I really like this movement. Everybody hates it universally. Even if you've been doing it for like 16 years like I have, you still hate it to some degree because it's pretty complicated. So I want to start with two models that I think are very, very important to set the tone and to start to frame this idea of sales, why it's important inside of the business, and how you can start to set up things inside of your processes, inside of your strategy to maximize that. So if you're in the CrossFit space, you are probably familiar with this pyramid right here. So this pyramid is what Coach Glassman outlined in his article, What is Fitness, back in 2002, when he outlined the theoretical hierarchy for the development of an athlete. And all this is to say is, like, if you were going to build the best version of yourself, this is how you would do it. At the base of the pyramid would be nutrition. On top of that, you would have metabolic conditioning. On top of that, you have gymnastics or body weight movements, weightlifting, and then throwing if you want to get really specific. And at the top, sport. Right now, if you don't pay your bills by exercising fast, you could just replace sport with the best version of you, right? And the whole purpose of that pyramid is to outline this is how you would optimize your overall health, wellness, and performance. Now, you can take that same model and then create something very similar, but do it through the lens of the business. So what I want to do is I want to show you our theoretical hierarchy for the development of an affiliate inside of Best Hour, because this is what we teach affiliates to do all the time. And I think creating frameworks and creating a roadmap is really, really important. So at the base of the pyramid, we've got sales. And the reason sales go here is because it's very similar to nutrition in the sense that both quantity and quality matter, right? So we think about, I want to have the right kind of food, and I want to have it in the right amount, and I want to have the right kind of sales, and I want to have it in the right amount. So above that, if we look at metabolic conditioning, when we think about metabolic conditioning, you could just replace that with kind of cardio, if you will. It's not sexy, but everybody knows that that's really the underlying engine of your overall fitness. And we're going to put operations here. Again, not sexy stuff, but how you function or how you execute your daily operations is really, really important. Now, above that, you've got gymnastics. Gymnastics is a sexy stuff that takes an immense amount of time to start to get good at, and people will dabble in it, but very few people will dive headlong in it and get really, really good at it, which makes it akin to marketing, right? Marketing, there's always another layer of marketing. There's always another advanced version of it, and this is why people struggle with it so much. More to come on marketing, because we're going to make that a lot easier for you as well. Now, on top of that, you've got weightlifting, and this is your service. I think this falls here because just like weightlifting, everybody thinks they're good at it, but few people are. Just like in the service business, When we talk about great coaches, everybody says they're really good at coaching, but very few people are actually really, really good at coaching. And then if we think about you at the top of the pyramid for the theoretical hierarchy for developing your affiliate is impact. Now, when we talk about impact, it's really, really important, right? When you start your business not with the idea to make $1 million. If you're like me, you started your affiliate because you said, hey, this had a profound impact on my life, and I want to give that to other people, okay? And this is why we've developed this model this way. Now, when we talk about impact, we want to have impact across 3 different segments of people. So when we say impact, we want the impact to be had for the customer, the team, and the business. Because what we know time and time again, when a new affiliate comes in and works with us or they're struggling, is that one of those 3 people is being either underserved or negatively impacted. So if we understand who the stakeholders inside of that, then we can start to build things and frame things correctly. But first and foremost, I think that understanding the relationship between these 2 pyramids is really, really important. Now, one caveat to this is this. Some people have a little bit of beef with sales being at the base of the pyramid. They say, hey, shouldn't impact be at the base there because it's the most important thing? Well, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how pyramids are built. Sales is not the most important thing, right? But what I will tell you is it does create the most stable business that you can build is if you've optimized sales. I have never once worked with an affiliate, we've worked with over 1,000 of them, who had great cash flow and came to us and was freaking out about stuff. It doesn't mean they don't have problems, but everybody comes to us because they have sales or financial problems, meaning you fundamentally cannot do a lot of different things if you cannot get the sales component of this, right? Like if you guys have heard Coach Glassman saying that says, hey, listen, you can't out-train a shitty diet. I would take it a little bit further, say you can't out-train a shitty diet, you can't out-sleep over training, and you cannot outsell a shitty product, right? So we're gonna walk through this whole model and some other ones, but I wanna set the table with understanding how do you create the most stable and most sustainable affiliate, and you can do it with this model. Now, it doesn't mean that you're only going to be working in one section at a time, or once you finish the base that you'll never go back there. It's like anything else. Just like training over here, you'll bounce back and forth between the different components of training. You're going to bounce back and forth between the different components of this pyramid endlessly, right? But figuring out, hey, which one of those should I be focused on and where is going to be something that we'll outline with you. And that's with the blueprint that we've created to go from 0 to $1 million inside of the affiliate because we've done it. So this is really important to set the table for this model here. Now, the second model that I want to show you is there's only 8 ways to grow your business. Okay, so when we're looking at the different ways to grow our business, there are fundamentally only 8 ways to do that. And inside of this funnel, I'm going to outline each one of those. And again, this is going to reinforce a lot of things that we've already talked about in other videos. So first and foremost, if I want to grow my business, I can just retain better, meaning I can have better retention, people can stay longer. After that, I can increase referrals. This goes back to the service, the 50-50 model. If I'm doing a good job, I'm probably going to be getting more referrals. If you're not getting referrals, one of 2 things is very likely. Either we're not very good at the thing or we're just not asking, at which point we can just ask, at which point we'll get more referrals. From there, enhance customer success. And I don't think enough of us think about this quite as much as we should, thinking, how do I get my clients a better outcome? How do I get my clients a better outcome faster? This is a really, really important component of making the customer the focus of what it is that we do. So if we're thinking about sales and thinking about the impact we're trying to make, the whole goal of this is to make the customer the hero. So if I am enhancing my customer success, this is one of the ways that's going to make growing my business significantly easier for me. Below that, we can refine sales and training inside of that. A lot of times when we bring in affiliates and we look at their sales process, it's not that the sales process, meaning like the flow of how the sales is built, it's just that people don't know how to execute inside of the flow. They don't know what to say. They don't know what not to say. They're not sure how to interact with somebody in a sales environment. After that, just looking at conversion. Am I converting the people or the leads that I'm getting at an appropriate rate? If I'm not, maybe we just need to think about what is wrong inside of that conversion process. Is it price? Is it process? I don't know, but we would want to take a look at that. After that, we look at transaction size. This is a lot to do with what is your pricing model. Is it too low, right? Is it too high? right? Looking at like what is the appropriate transaction size to optimize for you based on what it costs you to run your business. Meaning the transaction size needs to be in line with creating a profit in order to grow my business. Below that, frequency of purchase, meaning getting them to buy at a higher rate, whether that means they buy more products and services from me or they just continue to buy for a longer period of time. And then lastly, increasing leads. Now, what I want to outline about this is if you look at this funnel, a lot of people fail inside of business because they execute this funnel in the wrong order. So if you take this funnel and you flip it upside down and you had leads at the top, this is how most people think about growing their business. But notice that leads, increasing lead flow, is the last thing on this funnel. And that is very, very important when you think about sales. If you want to know what the number one indicator of somebody who is ignorant about entrepreneurship or ignorant about sales is when they show up and they say, I just need more leads. Anytime I hear that, that tells me that they fundamentally have a lack of understanding about systems, processes, sales, marketing inside of their business, because it is almost never just that they need more leads. A handful of times they might need more leads, but understand that nothing inside of the affiliate operates independently of anything else. And that's why when you look at all 8 of these, if you were to optimize all 8 of them and you start from the top and you work your way down, right? This is doing it well, but if you go bottom up, this is doing it wrong. And if you optimize this correctly in the right order, this is how you can build a really, really impactful affiliate moving forward. And the key to this, combined with the pyramid that I showed you earlier, is this. The purpose of a business is to create a decent profit decently. And I think that's really, really important if we're talking about being an affiliate owner, right? Most of us have some sort of weird aversion to money. We didn't get into it for money, but understand that money is a component of getting where I want to go, right? And if I think about it through that frame, which is create a decent profit decently, that puts the onus on me to provide value to the end user so that I can get what I need. Meaning like there's going to be value created and value captured inside of that transaction. And that's a really, really important component to wrap your brain around when you think about what it is that we do inside of the affiliate, because the reality is this. I can think of no greater endeavor than to improve another human being. And understand that is valuable. And it's so valuable that people will pay for it. Now, we don't want to gouge people, but understanding sales is a necessary component inside of the affiliate. And I'll take a phrase from one of my favorite people on planet Earth, Daniel Chaffee, owner of CrossFit Louvre, which is absolutely everything inside of the affiliate starts with a sale. If you do not have a sale, you do not have a business. And understanding how all of these components work together can start to frame your relationship with sales, your relationship with money, and really start to highlight how getting really good at this can increase the impact that you have across your team, yourself, and more importantly, the clients that you work with. Okay, so now that we have those basic frameworks for sales, one of the key components that many people skip over is this fundamental understanding of who is the offer for. So there's plenty of kind of names for this. If you want to say, ITA, right? Your ideal target audience. If you want to say ideal client, right? If you want to be like ambassadors, these are some of the terms that we'll use, right? Who would all of these, they're the same, right? What we're saying is who is the exact person that I want to make this offer to, right? Because as we're going to work through this, and what we're starting to outline here is this idea of selection and deselection. And these are very important concepts to understand. But understanding this, some of the greatest case studies in all of business failures are predicated on this concept right here, which is like understanding who the offer is for, and getting this wrong is one of the fastest ways to fail as a business, is not identifying who it is you are actually serving, and then fundamentally who it is that you do not want to serve. At the end of the day, you cannot be everything to everybody, and you're going to have to niche down who it is that you're talking to, and we'll get into more specifics with regard to that here in a little bit. But understanding who is the offer for, again, call it whatever you want, ITA, ideal client, ambassador, doesn't matter. They're the same thing, so we can use all of those terms interchangeably. Okay, so now that we understand that we need to identify who it is that we want to sell to, in order to figure that out, you need to ask yourself 4 questions, right? If I'm selling anything, it could be pizzas, it could be eyeliner, it could be fitness via CrossFit, I do need to ask myself these 4 questions. So it's really, really important to outline this to help you come to a good conclusion. So if we think about this, question number 1 is, who do I want to buy from me? What is that person? What age? Are they male? Are they female? Are they young? Are they old? Are they unemployed? Like, it doesn't matter, right? I need to figure out what that is for me. The second question I have to ask is, what must happen to cause them to buy? Okay. What is the series of things, the series of actions, the series of steps that would cause them to buy from me? They show up to my doorstep and they say, hey, take my money. I want what it is that you're offering. Third question is, what must happen to keep them coming back? And again, you'll start to see the themes here with regard to why retention is so important inside of this. And all of the models that we cover, retention is at the crux of all of that. What needs to happen inside of our interaction on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to keep them coming back so that they continue to buy from me? And then lastly, what could happen to cause them to not buy? How would the client become unhappy with my product or service? And answering these 4 questions is how we work through this process called selection and deselection. So understanding the relationship with both selection and deselection is really, really important. And most people will primarily focus just on selection and say, this is who I want to serve. But when we're talking about creating clarity and creating signaling, whether that's inside of my team or from a marketing standpoint, understand that deselection is just as important as selection if I'm trying to identify, market to, and sell to my ideal target audience. And I'm going to give you guys a perfect example. If you have been in the CrossFit space for a long time, like I have, and you're an OG and you're relatively salty, CrossFit did this, whether purposely or not on purpose, masterfully in the early days. So if you've been around long enough, you remember when one of the taglines for CrossFit was, our warm-up is your workout. And that is a classic example of deselection, right? And if we think about the glory days of CrossFit when it was on this hockey stick movement, deselection was a huge part of that, meaning like, hey, if you're going to come in and train in the affiliate, this is not for the faint of heart. This is for people that want to get after it. This is people that are chasing elite fitness. Okay. Now, I'm not here to say whether that was right or wrong. I'm here to say that it was a very beautiful expression of this idea of deselection. Now, inside of this whole process is when we look at selection versus deselection, I would also let you know that this is not a static process, meaning it's not ever fixed in time or space. So just because it worked in those early days in deselection doesn't mean that we don't need to come back to it and say, hey, how do we both select and deselect as we move forward? Because understanding, like, as markets change, as businesses mature, this is going to change as well, right? So we can't use the same deselection process that we did in early 2007 to 2012 because now we're talking about a broader population. So we need to figure out, how do I continue to both select and deselect as I move forward? And again, not saying it's good or wrong. I am saying that it was done, the effect of it was very, very good when they were working through that. And again, maybe they did it on purpose, maybe they didn't. I don't have the answer to that, but it is a really good example of this idea of selection versus deselection. But again, for you as a CrossFit affiliate, you need to understand how these two work in unison and figure out, hey, how are you both selecting and deselecting? So let me make this a little bit more real for you. Inside of the affiliate, if you have never told somebody who wants to buy from you, no, this is not the place for you, then you have not effectively deselected the clients that you want to serve. Now, if you're thinking about this and you're like, Fern, that is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard, is that like you would not sell to a client. Let me iron this out for you. So inside of CrossFit Rife, when we think about what we do and we value the community and we value coaching on the floor, like one of our core belief is that the coach is the single most important variable in a client's success, right? This is our way of saying that like coaching is really, really important, right? So when we think about that, that helps us deselect clients. So if I get a lead that comes into the gym and the first thing that they ask me is like, do you have open gym? That's really all I'm interested for. I just want to come in and train. This is how we can deselect people like that. And I'll very politely tell them like, listen, I'm happy to have you do open gym, but we don't have memberships that are based on just open gym. And if you just want to come and use the space, paying $180 to $200 a month just to have access to the facility, you're probably going to be overpaying for that. You're far better off going down the street and paying $30 a month to go use Lifetime Fitness or whatever else you want to do, because that's what we value. So that's a variant of me deselecting a client that comes through. Now, I'm a pragmatist, right? So at some point, if you are a struggling gym, you need to sell to everybody. But as you mature, as you grow, and you have the opportunity to select and deselect, it's really important that you know the difference between these two, because this one is the most important. Failure to deselect has significant impacts on culture long term, and it has significant impacts on creating cohesion across your clients and your staff because you don't understand how deselection works. So it's not saying that we don't like other people. It's just saying that like this is the way we do things and this is what we offer and this is how we do it. And if you don't like that, no harm, no foul, but this might not be an optimal environment for you to come in and train. And that's totally fine, right? Send them somewhere else. Everybody will be better off for it. They'll be happy at the other place and you'll be happier because you didn't have people that came into the gym and started messing with the environment inside of the gym. So again, we're going to continue to come back to this idea of selection and deselection, but I really wanted to hammer this home because if I don't have this baked into my sales process or the strategy with regard to how I execute sales, it's going to be really, really hard because you cannot say yes to everybody. You should not say yes to everybody. And fundamentally, you couldn't serve everybody if you wanted to. Now, there are a lot of ways to deselect, but I'll give you a very simple way of deselecting. This is this idea of coming up with what is your customer promise? What is it that you are promising to the customer when you come in? So I'll give you a very clear example. So at Best Hour, one of our promises to you is like nobody's going to do less gimmicky shit inside of helping you grow your business than we are. That's our promise to you. What we barter in is giving you sound business practices, doing the basics really, really well. And we're not here to give you all these fancy, bait and switch sales tactics. I got no problem if people want to do that, that's fine. But our promise to affiliates when they come in is like, nobody's going to do less gimmicky shit than we are. We're just going to hammer home the basics and build a really strong base so that you can grow your affiliate. But that would be an example of like, what is a customer promise to the customer coming in? This is a form of deselection. You give other examples. There's a really interesting case study on a bank called Commerce Bank. And what they were looking at, they said, hey, we're going to be targeting lower income people who really just want better customer service at the bank. And their customer promise to customers that were coming in is like, nobody's going to give you worse return on your money than we are, which sounds like a ridiculous promise to make. But they were being very upfront, be like, hey, we're not going to give you the best return on interest for your money, but we are going to give you the best customer service when you come into the bank. Now, this makes a lot more sense when you understand the customer base that they're working with, right? A 1% to 2% difference in return or interest on your money for lower income populations doesn't really matter. Now, if you're talking about somebody who has gobs of money and somebody who has tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, 1% to 2% now matters a lot, okay? But understanding who are you serving and what is your customer promise so that you can deselect inside of a segment of the population is a really, really important concept to understand. You just have to figure out what is that promise and how do you deselect and select at the same time. Okay, so we understand deselection. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty with regard to determining price structure, or how do you figure out where should your price or your cost for service fall in the overarching market. Now, if you are an experienced affiliate owner, you've been around for a long time, some of these concepts you're probably learning at what now feels retroactively, meaning like, oh my God, had I only known this earlier, this would have been very, very helpful to me. However, understand that like even if you're learning it now, this gives you the opportunity to improve your business moving forward. So what we're looking at in this matrix is I've got price on one axis, I've got service on the other axis. So I've got low here, high here, low there, high there. And I've just put this mean line here, meaning like there's prices that range, all the way across the spectrum inside of the market. And this is a really interesting concept to outline because what this starts to highlight for any particular business is what direction they should move based on market maturity and the different factors that they control inside of any given market. So let's look at the different components of this. And let's just say that inside of these two dotted lines is what we will call an immature market, right? And what we mean by immature market is just new, right? This is a new thing, right? Think about when the internet came out. AI is currently in kind of an immature market. And a lot of things are in flux in an immature market, meaning supply chain is in flux. Like who controls the most amount of information is in flux in an immature market. And the thing to know about here is that when you're living in an immature market, you can live in the middle when it comes to price, okay? Now, as a market matures, what happens is certain things start to be controlled inside of the market and living in the middle becomes a problem, right? So we have to make a decision about moving to one end of the spectrum or the other, meaning I'm going to go to low dollars or high dollars, okay? And when the market starts to mature, The reality is this: staying in the middle is a death trap. You cannot survive in the middle, and here's why. If I think about as markets mature, you have to think about supply chain, who controls what, and as markets mature, somebody is going to start to control supply and demand inside of a market. So think about Amazon. When Amazon came on and they were doing like internet sales and stuff like that, you could kind of get away with a bunch of different stuff inside of that market. But at this point, Amazon now controls almost unanimously online sales, right? And they offer low prices and they offer it to get it to you very, very quickly. Why? It's because they control supply chain. Okay. They control the resources that are going out. They control the flow of resources. And fundamentally, as a CrossFit affiliate, you don't have that. Now, what would that look like? I kind of mentioned in a previous video about how much control do you have of cost of acquisition or lead acquisition. Most affiliates have little to no control. It is kind of the hope and pray strategy. I hope somebody fills out the form on the website, and I pray to God it's a real person and not some sort of internet bot, which means you fundamentally can't live in the middle and you fundamentally can't live at the low end. So we have to rule these two out, which means we're left with moving towards the high end of the market. Now, the reason we can't go here is because we don't control supply chain and we don't control our lead flow. Largely speaking, there are a handful of gyms that do this pretty well, but for the most part, you don't control this, which means if I live here in the middle, which let's call the middle something between $100 to $150, this becomes no man's land. And the reason being is because many things have changed as we transitioned from an immature market, moving to the edges. So this is going to be mature, and this is going to be mature. And what happens is costs go up. Your cost of delivery starts to go up as the market matures. And at these price points, you don't have the margin built in for your service delivery to survive inside of this market now, which means you're left with moving towards the high end of the market. Now, what does high end mean? There's some flux in there, but understand it's probably higher than what you're charging right now. And why is this really important? And how does this layer over into some of the other things that we've covered so far? If I'm going to move towards the high end of the market, let's just say that you currently charge, I don't know, $150, and we want to move towards the $200 range because I need to build in a margin so that I can operate the business effectively and reallocate capital to my business to either grow it or train my staff or pay myself a living wage. All of those would be in the cards for how I would do this. In order to be able to do that, I have to improve the service. Going back to how important service and retention is in this entire game. If you want to move towards the high end, you have to optimize and maximize service delivery. Because again, we don't control supply chain when we move to the bottom left. Okay, you don't have the ability to control this. That's not really how it works in the service-based industry. If you were selling cogs, selling socks or something like that, this is a different game that can be played here. But in a service industry, living in the middle is Death Valley. Moving towards the lower end of the spectrum is not really how that works, unless you have huge marketing capacity behind you, like a Planet Fitness, a Gold Gym, or something like that. Typically, no CrossFit affiliate has those resources. So we're forced to move up towards the high end. And understanding moving towards the high end, there comes an obligation to that. And that obligation is to optimize your service delivery. If you are doing that, you have the opportunity to survive and thrive at the high end margin over there, because now I have the margin, I have the capital resources that I can redistribute back into the business so that I can train my staff, improve the facility, improve client experience, and pay myself a living wage so that I'm not gouging my eyes out every morning because I'm a low paid slave labor inside of my own business. And this is a really important concept to understand. The most important thing to understand is we are no longer in an immature market, meaning 2007 to 2012, CrossFit was in an immature market. Okay. 2007 was almost 20 years ago. We are now in a mature market, at which point, if you are still living here, you have to make the decision which direction you're going to move. I already outlined in a previous video the difference between the low-cost models and what you run, and it is in your best interest to move in that direction. You just have to understand it comes at a cost, and you are obligated to be really, really good at delivering the thing. All right, guys, if you like this content, please subscribe to the podcast, but understand we work with affiliates. If you are interested in building your business, understanding strategy, building a better community, and building better coaches and careers for them, hit the link somewhere around this video and we'd love to have a call with you. I get asked all the time, what gym software should a gym owner use? And the short answer is, I don't care. What I care about is the companies like PushPress design software that helps gym owners run better businesses. So if you're working with a software company, you're not happy, and you don't know what to do with the information that software gives you every single day, check out PushPress. They've got built-in systems like the 180-day journey that we helped them build inside of PushPress Grow that'll help you interact with your clients at a better clip in order to improve your retention. So if that's something you're interested, reach out to those guys at PushPress and help you run a better box today. Okay, so inside of that model, I think there's really two big takeaways. The first one is it's really, really hard to be the low-cost provider if you're not the low-cost producer. That model just doesn't really work inside of the market that we currently live in for CrossFit affiliate owners. And the second one I think is even more important, which is service is fundamentally not sustainable if it's gratuitous or charitable. Meaning like we have to charge a fair value for the product and service that we are providing. Again, the purpose of a good business is to get a decent profit decently. That means run a good business, charge fair market value for it, and then reallocate those resources to make sure that all three stakeholders, yourself, your team, and your clients are getting the impact that they're looking for. All right, now if we wanted to simplify this, we'll talk about another model that you've probably heard before, and it's hey, you can either get it fast, cheap, or good, but you can only choose two of those. And if we think about how that relationships works inside of a service-based business, we think about time, price, and quality. And again, you can only choose two of them. If you want it quickly, it's probably not going to be high quality and it's probably going to cost you a lot of money. If you want it cheap, it's probably not going to be high quality, but you can get it probably fast. Okay. So thinking about how this relationship works, but ultimately understanding this, if you're going to try to deliver on all three of these, then that equals death. This is how businesses die because they don't understand the relationship between time, price, and quality and thinking about how that works inside of your affiliate. Meaning, we're not in the business of quick results, meaning like we're not in the 6-week challenge. We're not in the rapid weight loss camp. And again, understanding how this model relates to something like deselection would say, hey, listen, well, if you're looking for fast, then this is not for you. We're going to charge appropriate market price, but we're going to give you the best quality service so that you can get the outcome that you want. This is a form of deselection and understanding how these three mechanisms work. Because if you don't understand these, you come up with poor price points and ultimately you pick the wrong clients. And there is nothing more fatal to a business than picking the wrong clients. And that is a perfect segue into the next framework. And this is a really important framework. I had some recent revelations with regard to this framework because I just learned it not too long ago. But this is really, really important because having looked under the hood of well over 1,000 affiliates, and this is something that we help with affiliates with all the time, is understanding who are you serving, and then do I currently have a subset of clients that I should maybe either give another offer to or maybe get rid of over time, right? And it's this matrix, which is like, what does somebody pay versus what does it cost to serve, right? So price paid versus cost to serve. And again, simple 2x2 matrix, low being here, high being here. And this is a really, really interesting concept. So I had the opportunity to sit down with a very well-respected professor recently who's analyzed thousands upon thousands of businesses. And what he said is that more than 90% of businesses, when they evaluate them, have a huge assortment of customers that they serve, meaning they've got some people over here. These are my cash cows, right? They've got some people over here, right? They've got some people over here, and they've got some people over here, right? And understanding that 90% of businesses fall in this category. And what this indicates, if your scatter plot looks like this is an indication that you have no strategy, meaning like you've not identified who it is you're selling to, you've not deselected, or it could be poor execution. Meaning you could have identified the right target audience, but maybe I sold them a bad package, meaning like I didn't price it correctly based on identifying the right person. Because understanding you can have a bad offer with good clients, and I can have bad clients with a good offer. And if those things don't match, I'm still going to end up with something like this. And again, this is where things get really, really, really ugly. And the reality is like most CrossFit affiliates have some subset of segments that fall in this quadrant, and this equals a problem, okay? Right? If you have a huge bunch of people, there are certain scenarios in which you would want to have clients over here. I won't dive into that right now. It's for the most part not relevant to CrossFit affiliates. But those would be like, hey, I'm helping somebody, or they're helping me test something, or there's some sort of relationship there that I want to leverage at a later date. But for the most part, this is really something that I want to avoid. But understand, if you're looking through your client list and this is what it looks like, this is a problem. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. So many times when we are evaluating an affiliate when they come through, first thing we want to know is we want to know all their numbers. I want to pop the hood, I want to look at the guts of this thing, and I want to see what's going on. And they've got legacy rates upon legacy rates upon legacy rates, and then they've got new rates, and then they've got discounts, and then if you only work on Tuesdays, that's a different discount. If you're a Sagittarius, you get a discount. It's just ridiculous. They get all sorts of everything. And what that ends up looking like, it ends up looking a lot like this matrix right here. And this is a really, really significant problem because, again, going back to this means you have no strategy. So to bring this concept home, if that's your affiliate, this is something that we need to fix. Now, ultimately, how do I look at fixing this problem? And the first thing is like, where would I want my clients to live? And if we think about this, if I draw a mean line here, right? In a perfect world, I would have all of my clients north of the line if I'm looking at the price they pay versus the cost to serve them, because this one is just not a sustainable model, meaning like it cost me a ton of money to serve them and they paid a lot of money. Meaning it's not that we're trying to underserve people, but understand the margins get really, really, really tight here. And it creates a scenario where I cannot redeploy capital to either grow strategies, hiring people, improving the facility, you name it, you just can't execute it there. So in a perfect world, you would want to push people up in this direction. And this leads into this other concept of trying to avoid the death trap of turning your CrossFit affiliate into a commodity. And this is really important, and I'll give you examples of how this works. So before we dive into this, let's talk about like what is the definition of a commodity. And a commodity is a basic good or service that is interchangeable with other things. And that is what we are trying to avoid. So when we're thinking about how do I avoid the death trap, what we need to understand is like A, what is a commodity? And then B, how do I avoid understanding the commodity life cycle so that I can be somewhere in the matrix that allows me to survive for a longer period of time. Okay, so when we're talking about the commoditization life cycle, there's how it typically works, and then I'll give you more specifically how it typically works inside of the CrossFit space. So typically kind of life starts over here as a business, meaning you probably need to charge a little bit higher than you want to in order to get the business off of the ground. And it's going to cost you a lot to serve because you don't have a lot of resources at your disposal, whether it's tools, systems, people, whatever. So those two things are at odds. And then as you start to grow your business a little bit, you can move over to what we call good times, meaning I've got good margins, the cost of service coming them down. And then eventually what happens is you get people that are going to start coming to you and they're saying, hey, like, can you give me a break, or can you sell me this other thing, right? Inside of a CrossFit gym, most of the time we actually start at, a low price, low cost to serve, or a low price, high cost to serve over here because we're afraid to charge inside of the market. But understand, like, once you kind of get that corrected, then it starts to look like this. But let's just say that when CrossFits are typically struggling, they're in one of these two quadrants, or they're in good times moving towards give me a break. Now, what would that look like inside of a CrossFit affiliate? So let's say that everything's hunky-dory inside of the affiliate, and suddenly somebody wants to downgrade to a limited attendance membership, or they want to only do open gym, or they want you to spend a little bit extra time with them, but they don't really want to pay for personal training. And this means I'm moving towards give me a break, meaning they're paying the cost for your baseline membership, but they want you to throw in more on top of that, at which point your cost to serve starts to move over here to the right, meaning that's going to cost me way more to serve that clientele than it actually should. But understand, as that life cycle happens and I start to make this and I move here, this is where life ends. Okay? And understanding, how do I prevent myself from going through that full commoditization life cycle? And understand, if I am moving in this direction, how do I move myself back up to good times? And a lot of this goes back to what we talked about before, is deselection, or just saying no, meaning, hey, there are some places and then some customers that can live here that provide value to me and I provide value to them. But for the most part, once people start to ask you to break apart your services and get subsets of your service, and I only want this part of your service, but I don't want that, that means you're moving to the give me a break component, and at which point you're well on your way to where life ends inside of the business. Now, another example of this is the programming space inside of CrossFit. Programming at this point is a full-blown commodity. You can get it in a lot of places. You can get it for relatively low cost. And that's an example of commoditization, right? Meaning I get the same kind of product, slightly different flavor, typically you're looking at, most people are buying from somebody like Mayhem, which is just a larger known brand. But at the same time, CrossFit HQ is giving away programming for free, right? So again, that's a perfect example of like what happens there is cost only starts to pull down as things start to commoditize, right? And that is what we're trying to avoid, because that is trading a thing for money. And that is not the business we are in. We are in the product of trading a result for money in that scenario. They want to get a specific outcome. So just to explain to you how this works so that you can maybe recognize this when this starts to happen inside of your affiliate, because I've been through this, every affiliate I've ever seen has been through this, recognizing it, and don't go down that path because it's really, really hard to come back from that and reverse the cycle when you do that. Now, inside of that, we want to talk about like, why do people do this? Like, why does this actually happen? If we go back to the matrix and we look at price on this axis, cost to serve on this axis, and we know that we want the people that we serve to be above the line, the question now becomes, well, why don't people just move people back above the line? And knowing why you would not do something or why people do that is really important. And the first thing that we see is just ego, right? People just have an ego. They have an unwillingness to make a change because they don't think they need to, or they're living in the past or whatever reason. The second reason is poor measurement, meaning they don't fundamentally know the numbers, right? So they are not measuring. And anytime you are presented with lack of data or lack of information, it is very, very hard to make a good decision. So first one is ego, second one is poor measurement. And then the third one, this is going to be poor incentives. Now, what do I mean by poor incentives? Meaning I just designed it incorrectly, right? I mean, I made a bad offer and my ego is preventing me from changing it because I fundamentally don't understand how that's impacting my business. So when we're thinking about why don't people push people back above this line so they can create a healthy and thriving business, it's because of one of these three things. Usually it's this like weird cycle of those three things feeding it on top of each other. But if you can get past that and you can understand that, and then you can start to correct that, I can start to move people back in the event that I've got people moving the wrong direction inside of the commoditization life cycle. But it's really important to know this, right? And I know we're talking about really high level stuff, but I've yet to see a business inside of the CrossFit space where this doesn't apply in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a subset of people or the entire gym. And it's because just people just don't know. Like nobody's ever taught them this stuff before. And I know so we were talking about sales, but the first thing that I need to do if I want to set myself up to be successful inside of sales is I need to understand who I'm going to sell to. I need to understand how to price things correctly. And I need to understand how the market works in order to avoid the pitfalls. Because again, there is endless amount of case studies on companies going through that commoditization life cycle and dying because they didn't recognize what was happening to them. Okay, so at this point, we're kind of done with the theory and the models, and I want to get a little bit more granular about some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. But I do want to kind of quickly go back to the ego, poor measurement, and poor incentives. And I want to talk specifically about the poor measurement. And when I mean talk about the poor measurement is if you have all of these frameworks available to you, you have the opportunity to learn to speak the language of business. So Keith Cunningham says that the language of business is accounting, right? Understanding the numbers of business is like learning to speak English, right? So if I go to Mexico or Spain and I don't know how to speak Spanish, I'm gonna have a really hard time interacting with people and getting what I want and going where I want to go. And it's no different in business. I realize that none of us really started a CrossFit affiliate because we wanted to learn business numbers, but understand if I don't learn to speak the language of business, the likelihood of me seeing any sort of success and therefore my clients seeing success becomes woefully low. And we just need to learn to speak the language. So when we're talking about speaking the language, you got to dive into some of the numbers. And this is going back to what is the number one indicator of somebody that has low business acumen is when they walk in the door and they say, I need more leads, right? So let's talk about leads, because when we're talking about sales pipeline and leads, we need to start there because this is really, really important. So when we talk about leads, meaning opportunities for sale, what do we need to know about leads, right? So when somebody says they need more leads, fundamentally it is just and this, I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that. It's just an ignorant statement, because the question should be, or my counter question when somebody says that is, how many more leads do you need? Or otherwise stated, what is your lead need. And this is a really, really important concept. I have yet to have an affiliate walk into our door inside of Best Hour, and we help people with this all the time. If this is something that if any of this is important to you, if any of this is sparking questions, if you want help with any of this stuff, reach out. I'd be happy to set up a call and help you grow a better box. But the point is, you need to understand what your lead need is. I have yet to have an affiliate walk into the door and know what that means. And when we say you need more leads, it's an actual number, meaning it's 22, it's 37, it's 5, whatever. The point is, it's not more, it's a number. So how do I figure out what that number is? So I'm going to give you the basic calculation for determining what your lead need is. Without knowing that, you just end up making a really bunch of terrible decisions. So we have to make some basic assumptions in there. And the one assumption that we're going to make is that you are converting, right? I'm going to put it here, which is the assumption is converting sales at 50%, right? It's not great. It's not terrible. It's right down the middle, right? So we're going to make one assumption is that you are converting at 50%. So outside of that, I need to know what your retention rate is. So we're going to use simple math here. But your lead need is going to be 3 times your churn. Okay, so you need to know a couple pieces of information. I need to know how many leads I have coming in. I need to know what my churn is, and I need to know what my conversion rate is. If you have all those three pieces of information, then we can figure out what your precise number is. Okay, so let's redo this board. And let's use some simple math. Let's say a gym has 100 members. Okay. And let's just say that they have 7% churn. 7% churn. Okay. At 7% churn, I chose 100 because this makes the math easy. That means that they are losing 7 members every single month. Right. Now, I won't go down this rabbit hole of compounding churn, but understand that if you're running a 7% churn monthly, that looks a lot like 60, almost 70% churn of your entire gym population in a 12-month period, okay? I'm not going to run through the math, but understand the higher churn gets, the harder everything gets, going back to good service so that you can have really good retention. But if I've got 100 members and I've got 7% churn, that means 7 people are walking out of the door every single month, like clockwork. Sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower, but let's just say on average, it's 7. Yeah, we'd like it to be lower, but we see 7 very regularly. Inside of Affiliate U, our ceiling is 5. We'd like you to be close to 3%. There's really not a ton of value in bringing it under 3%. The ROI on that effort is negative at that point. You've solely relegated this to people that are moving at that point. You're not going to convince them to not take a new job. So let's just say that this gym has 7% churn. They're losing 7 people. And again, we know that they're converting at 50%, okay? So knowing that, if we go by 3 times churn, we know that in order to grow, they need 21 leads. Not more, 21, okay? Because again, if they are closing at 50% at 21, that means that they are selling 10 new members. And magically, what this looks like is our golden rule, which is grow by net 3. Okay, so we're using that math to walk you through. It's not more leads. We have to figure out what the number is. And usually when somebody says more leads, all this tells me is that they do not speak the language of business, and therefore it is very challenging them to solve virtually any problem inside of the business. And you have to know some basic numbers again. And it's starting to speak the language, starting to understand the numbers and the mechanics of how things work. And if I know this, then I can start to look at what are the 2 most important metrics that I would look at in any side of business if I only had to choose 2. And I'm going to walk you through that right now. Okay, so when we're talking about the 2 most important metrics in a CrossFit affiliate, I was recently asked this question by somebody that I have a tremendous amount of respect for in the software space. And I said, hey, if you could track 5 things, what would they be? And I said, well, I would only want 2. Not that other metrics are not important, but simpler is always better. And I'm always thinking about this through the lens of a CrossFit affiliate owner, more specifically my previous self who didn't know shit about shit. And I want to make things very, very simple. So the two most important metrics that I want to track and that we help people track all the time in Affiliate U, number one is churn, and then number two, what is the efficiency of the funnel? Okay, so very, very simply, churn, back, right? Funnel efficiency, front, okay? If I know those two things, I can make some very strong assumptions about the business. I can make some very strong assumptions about length of engagement, about average client value, about revenue, about rate of growth. I can make tremendous amount of assumptions. Again, they are assumptions, but I can make them with good confidence at this point. Now, the trajectory of those assumptions or the rate of those assumptions is the variable here. But if I know what their churn is, right, what's going out the back end or the bottom, and I know what the front end looks like, how are they managing the opportunities they're getting, we can start to solve a lot of problems. Now, this leads us into this concept of if we're going to primarily focus on, hey, how do we start to optimize the funnel efficiency? And this is where we get into the theory of constraints. So theory of constraints is just a very simple concept of saying, identifying what is the single thing that if fixed would give me the most leverage inside of the business. Like if I could just look at one thing and I could fix that, we would unclog this whole machine. If you're, my previous background was in supply logistics. This is talking about, green belt and Lean Six Sigma. But again, we're talking about choke points. So funnel efficiency is how our leads manage from the point of contact to the point of sale. And even if I want to go further than that, to the point of churn. Okay, so when we're talking about the theory of constraints, we're specifically talking about the theory of constraints with regard to its impact on your funnel efficiency. So funnel efficiency, what are we talking about? It's just this series of interactions that happen between the point at which somebody inputs their information on your website to the point you make a financial transaction where they say, I'm joining CrossFit Rife. I'm going to be here forever. So this may not be your exact funnel, but this is a very, very basic funnel that will illustrate my point, which is I've got a lead that comes in. I've got a contact point, whether that's a phone call, email, text, doesn't matter. Then I've got, do they show up after that for whatever the event is going to be behind contact, whether that's a consult, whether it's a free class, whether it's onboarding, whatever. And then I've got convert, and then I've got referral. And if you show us these numbers, it will be very obvious where the constraint lies. So I'm just going to put some random numbers on here. Let's just say that a gym has 15 leads per month. So we're going to do this on a monthly basis. That's low, but I'm trying to use some low numbers. Let's just say that they got in contact with 13 of them. They got 5 of them to show up. They converted 3, and they got 0 referrals. So inside of this funnel, understanding the theory of constraints allows us to diagnose where we should put our time and effort first, meaning like what is the biggest rate of return for my efforts inside of fixing this. And the things that pop out immediately are like, if I'm getting contact with 13 of 15, that's a pretty good contact rate. In a perfect world, would we want it to be 100%? Sure, unlikely because, dead internet theory says that there's a lot of robots floating around the internet. So let's assume that they're doing their due diligence and they are contacting people and they're doing it quickly, meaning within 5 minutes to get there. And then they have 5 of those 13 show up, and then they convert 3. They're getting no referrals. Now, we could go a couple different ways here, and the answer is we would attack all of them, but order of operations matters, right? So what is my easiest point of attack here? And I would typically tell you that if I've got 5 people sitting in front of me, and I'm only converting 3, there's something going on in that sales interaction that is typically pretty easy to fix. So my first point of attack is going to be from show to convert, because I've owned my CrossFit for 16 years. If somebody chooses to fill out the form on your website and show up to your facility and they do not buy, you fucked up, okay? Almost everybody buys when they go into a CrossFit affiliate. And every affiliate owner we work with, they say, I'm pretty good at sales. Everybody that walks in the door, they buy. And that's not because they're good at sales. It's because the person already made the decision to buy when they show up to a CrossFit gym. That's just kind of the nature of the ecosystem inside of CrossFit. So understanding this is where I would go first, right? Because let's just say that if we add churn onto this, right? So we know that they're churning 7, right? And right now, they're only converting 3 of those. I mean, they're at a net loss of 4 per month. Well, the first thing I want to do is stop the bleeding in this scenario. So if I can convert 5 of 5, well, now I'm in a net loss of 2. Then what I'm going to do is the next choke point that I'm going to look at, the next constraint is right here, because there is a huge opportunity for success to fix this to this. So this would be number one, and then this would be number two. Now, why would I not just go here first? Because if I'm going to try to bring in more people, I'm still going to have a conversion problem. I want to fix the conversion problem first before I get people to show up a little bit more. Because if I have a conversion problem, I'm still going to have the same problem if I haven't fixed that, even if I get more people to show up. So I'm just creating a larger version of the same problem. So first, fix your conversion. That could be how price is given. That could be who's controlling the conversation. That could be any number of things. But I want to improve conversion because they're sitting right there in front of me. Then I want to figure out what's going on. Why is less than 50% of these people that I've had some sort of interaction with showing up to whatever the appointment is going on? And that could be how you're doing booking. Is it self-booking? Is it, are you booking for them? Am I booking too far out? There's all sorts of things. But the point that we're illustrating here is if I know where the constraints are, what I'm left with is a series of very specific questions about how to solve the problem, because the problem becomes very obvious. The problem is right here. Right? So I know a series of things inside of these two transactions or three transactions that are going to lead me to some pretty clear conclusions about where we need to address our time and energy. And that's before we just go to the referral, which is if you're giving a good service, just ask for the referral. I said in a previous video, if you're not getting referrals, it's because of one of two reasons. I'm either just not that good at delivering the thing, or I'm just not asking. So step one is just ask. So again, highlighting this and how this factors into what your lead need is, because in almost every scenario, and again, I have popped the hood on so many affiliates, it is nauseating. Almost none of them need more leads. Almost none. There are some. That's usually a website issue in most instances. But most people don't know how bad their churn is actually, and most people don't understand their funnel efficiency. And again, more leads is only a bigger problem, and that bigger problem is going to lead to a whole other host of problems that you're probably not prepared to deal with either. So understanding theory of constraints and how this applies to your funnel efficiency is really, really important. And that first starts with like understanding your lead need, because in a lot of instances, 15 is enough. You don't need more. This whole thing is screwed up. So let's just fix this. Then we'll put more leads on the front end by simply asking, and then we'll be in a better spot. Okay, so we've covered a ton of stuff, and now I want to dive deep into the tactics, but I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning of the video, which is I told you guys that this video was going to be light in tactics and heavy in principles, theories, and models, because if I get those correct, tactics mean less and less to me. I won't need to be really heavy on the tactics if I get those above things correct. So I do want to dive into some tactics, but I want to dive into tactics that are going to be relevant to you regardless of the ecosystem, regardless of where your gym is, regardless of geographically where you're located, when you started, all of that stuff. And there's three things that we look at that are tried and true when it comes to sales tactics. And the first one is we need to remove friction. Right? Now, friction can come in a lot of different forms, right? Friction can be how the website is designed. Friction can be how your booking sequence is designed. Friction can be how the sales interaction happens. Friction can be how they actually sign up for a membership. Friction can be when they get started. There's so many places where we introduce friction where it just doesn't need to exist, and this always negatively impacts the sale. So I need to evaluate the entire process start to finish, and I need to remove friction. Again, start with your website and then work your way back to the point of sale. The easiest way to think about this is anything that would make it harder for the person to give you information, show up to your facility, give you money. Take that, make it easy, make their life easy. Think like point and click. The easier I can make it for them, the more likely they are to buy. The second thing here is the offer. Let's just say I've removed all the friction that I can. I may just have a poorly designed offer. And the offer can be as simple as like how prices are stated, meaning like what order are they given in. It could be how many things you're putting in the offer. There's a lot of ways, but for the most part, think simple is better, right? So simple is always better. If you want to go by the rule of three, giving a consumer any more options than three is going to create a buyer's dilemma. A buyer's dilemma, the confused mind always says no. So if I'm giving them so many options that they're now confused, the result of that is going to be a non-purchase, right? So anytime we think about that, we want to simplify this. So when we create the offer, I don't want to have this whole hodgepodge of offerings inside of, meaning I've got like a limited membership, I've got a punch card, I've got drop-in, I've got unlimited, I've got unlimited plus, I've got unlimited super platinum, I've got unlimited plus PT, I've got unlimited, which means they can come live at my house and they can train in my backyard. I don't want to have all of these options, right? So we want to make it very, very simple. Now, inside of Affiliate U, we typically reduce people down to just having one offering and structuring it in a couple different ways. It's not because we have any sort of beef with limited memberships. It's typically because the person who's offering the limited membership, meaning the affiliate owner, is not offering it because it's a good deal. It's offering it's because they're afraid to sell the higher price thing, which we can fix. So it's not about the offer, it's about why they're offering it. And that's something that we'll work through. But a simple tactic when you're offering, let's just say that you're designing your memberships in some sort of agreement fashion. All we're simply stating is that if they agree to be there for a longer period of time, there will be some sort of price decrease for them. Let's just say that your base membership is going to be, meaning your unlimited membership is going to be $170, right? Whether it is or whether it's not, we'll just use that as a baseline. So I've done this many, many times. And let's just say that for the year, right, it's $170 a month, right? If they want to be there for, and this is for the year, if they want to be there for 6 months, then it's $180. And if they want to be there for no agreement length, meaning this is not applicable, then this is $195. Okay. So simply understanding that price out of place will kill the sale. And what do I mean by price out of place? Well, there's two places that price out of place can happen. One is if I put my prices on the website. If I put the prices on the website, you're just going to get less leads because people will deselect themselves. And we do want to deselect people, but we want to be in control of the deselection process, right? And if you are not selling the memberships that you want, if you do not have a waiting list, if you are not making the money that you want, then you should take your prices off your website. I've never seen that be a negative impact to the gym. Now, if you don't want any more members and you're good, then I'm good with you being good, and you can put as much stuff on the website as possible. But if that's not you, then I would consider taking them off. But let's just say this is the structure. And a classic mistake that people would make is they say, hey, if you're here for a year, you can pay $170. And if you want half a year, you can pay $180. And then if you don't want any agreement length, you can pay $195. And the fundamental problem with this is the order with which it was given, because people remember the last number that we said. So they walked away at $195 as the number in their mind. And a simple tactic is just reverse the order. So tell them, hey, the longer you're here, the cheaper it gets. So if you want no agreement, it's $195. 6 months, it's $180. And if you want to be here for a year, it's $170. We've got agreements. You can cancel at any time. But now they're left with $170. So again, thinking about how that is delivered is really, really important. And again, price out of place kills the sale. And this is out of place, just like having those prices on the website is out of place, because they don't understand the value proposition when they just look at your website. So we're getting into some very basic tactics here. Again, I don't want to go deep down the rabbit hole of tactics because tactics are for JV players and tactics change every single day and they'll very quickly become irrelevant. Okay, so we've got the first two things that we want to look at. We know we want to remove friction, everything from the website all the way to the point where we actually have a financial transaction. We know we might need to restructure or downsize the offer, meaning less is more in a lot of instances. Price out of place kills the sale, and the confused mind always says no. And the last one, and this is arguably my favorite because this framework changed a lot for me inside of sales, and this concept of the control V, right? Right, or just the concept of control. So remove friction, fix the offer, and then maintain control throughout the sale. Now, I wish I know where I got this from in order to give credit, but for the life of me, I cannot remember and I cannot find it anywhere else. But understand this is not my idea, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. So it's this idea of the control V, and it's a pretty simple concept, and this fundamentally changed how I interact in a sales process in any given scenario. And it's just this idea of understanding control inside of that process. And the basic premise here is that we want to maintain control at all times. So a V has two vectors. So I've got this vector and I've got this vector. Let's just say that this vector over here is the lead and then this is you. Okay. So understanding where both of these vectors go. If we stay on the leads vector, this goes to no sale, right? Wah, wah, this is you being sad, okay? If we stay on my vector, this goes to a sale, Yay, this is me being happy. So how do I determine what vector we're on and what is the importance of this? The importance of this is understanding the longer we stay on any given vector, the more likely we are to end up with that outcome. So the longer I stay on the vector of the lead, I am likely to end up with no sale. The longer we stay on my vector, the more likely we are to get a sale. And the longer we do that, the wider the gap becomes between those two, at which point the harder it becomes to switch vectors. So the longer I stay on the leads vector, the harder it becomes to switch them over to my vector. Now, this poses the obvious question is, how do you determine who or what vector you're on? And here's what I would tell you. The person asking the questions is in control. This is how you maintain control. The person asking the questions maintains control and determines what vector we are on. So simple example is somebody gets on the phone with you like, hey, what's the price, right? And now you are back on your heels, understanding we are on their vector and we are going to no sale. Now, how do I move very quickly from that vector to my vector? Well, I ask a counter question. What exactly are you looking for? Have you ever been to a CrossFit gym? I am moving quickly over to my vector and I'm moving away from this idea of just trading time for money to trading value for money because I'm trying to figure out what it is that they want. So understanding how this vector works or how this principle works and understanding how to quickly pivot off of that. So if you get an inbound question, you're going to counter with a question because we're not in this to just trade time for money, right? We're in the impact business. So understanding this, the more questions that I ask, the easier it is for me to deselect somebody if that is appropriate, right? If I find out that all they care about is open gym and the CrossFit games, I'm like, this ain't the place for you, man. I wish you best on your endeavor, but that's not what we do here. Like we deal with, grandma and working moms and working professionals. And if that's what you're looking for and you want to train all day, there's a gym right down the street. That's all they do. They train there until their eyes bleed. You should go down there. Right? But if I don't ask the appropriate questions, I'm not going to get the information that I need to select or deselect this person when they come in. So this one is probably the most important concept that I've ever learned in sales. And it's just this very simple concept of the control V, which is like the person asking the question is the person in control of the sale because they determine how the value proposition is displayed inside of this interaction. So take this one, use it as much as you can. But this one made things very, very easy for me in sales because it simplified the whole process for me and really, really solidified like how do I maintain control inside of this, kind of like weird, hairy monster that is the sales process. Okay, so those three tactics, and when we have used those inside of hundreds and hundreds of affiliates, have in a lot of instances doubled and sometimes tripled the size of the business simply by fixing those things, meaning I understand how to remove friction from the process, make it easier for people to get to me and to have the transaction. I understand how to correctly design an offer, and then I understand how to maintain control of the sales process. In a lot of instances, in most instances, simply fixing those things has tremendous outcome, right? That and combined with understanding sales, having a good strategy, all those things. But again, I told you guys that this video is going to be really light on the tactics. Not that those aren't super impactful, but way heavier on the principles so that you understand when you're executing those tactics, how they move up and how they impact your overall business moving forward. So take all of this information. I hope this was valuable for you guys. If you guys have any questions about sales inside of your business and you guys want help growing a better box, reach out. There's a link somewhere around this video. Set up a call. We'll be happy to talk with you, but I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. We appreciate you listening and choosing to have us help you in your passion for coaching and affiliate ownership. You can find more episodes just like this on all podcast platforms. If you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to us on any social media platforms, or you can visit www.besthouroftheirday.com to book a call. If you found this episode helpful for you, please share it so that we can help other coaches and affiliate owners to help build a bigger and stronger CrossFit community. Thanks for listening.